All right, we are almost there. 1 week left. This morning I downloaded a bunch of your final projects and uploaded those. So let's go ahead and start with a little bit of housekeeping, what we've got coming up. So, our next module, we've got our discussion to just kind of wrap up the semester as a whole. We've got the final exam, and I've got some questions by email that I've got answers to in another place. So the exam, this is going to be open book, but under a 2 hour time limit. Um, we'll talk more about that in a second. But what I want to show you right now in here is the final presentations that you guys put together and how to go about evaluating them. So there's a bunch of presentations, so it's not reasonable for us to say everyone evaluates everyone's presentation because you would each have 19 presentations to evaluate, which is just too much. I think five is a reasonable number, and so I've assigned each of you five people to evaluate. I'm assigning them, that way everyone gets at least five evaluations on their work without anyone being obliged to give more than five evaluations. That said, you are welcome to go above and beyond and do more evaluations. If you want to, if someone's topic seemed interesting in the discussions, by all means, check them out. So the evaluations are going to be through this Google form linked to in the module. It will collect your Farmingdale email address. You should click the box saying that's okay. If you're not logged in, then there should be a little way to log in. I don't know why it's not working for me. If you run into problems, let me know. So look at who you're evaluating, click on them, and then you just drop in. I've got some guidelines for how I want you to think about those, but then you're just on a few different margins, giving some scores, giving some comments that you want to give to your peer, and some comments that you'd like to give me to not necessarily share directly with that peer. So while we've got it, what I want you to think about here is basically I want you to not give the points away too much. Don't worry about giving a peer a low grade and having that hurt them. Your evaluations are input, but they are not decisive. So a lot of the times I will ask for peer evaluations and students will do one of two things. They'll either say 5 out of 5, whatever, give them all the points, or they'll say 0 out of 5, give them no points so that I'm higher up on the curve. Neither of those are helpful, and if your evaluations look like that, I'm going to basically disregard them. What I want you to think about here is, relative to the things that you're seeing or relative to what we might hope for, A being really exceptional rather than just kind of a default, right? Pre-grade inflation, right? So as some guidelines, you might think if you saw this sort of work in the workplace, you'd say give this person a promotion. Right? You guys know who you work with. You don't look at your peers and say this guy definitely needs a promotion, but sometimes you do come across a coworker who you think really does kick ass and should be promoted. What we expect is the norm is C, right? C in the sense of average, middle of the road. Nothing wrong with C. So I'll let you read through my guideline here. Let's go back to our miscellaneous stuff. So, peer evaluations, we've got that. Get rid of that. The final exam, let's talk about that. So, a helpful way to study for this will be to look through the old written assignments. Make sure your notes from the class are nice and tidy, well put together so that they're easy to search through. Because there's going to be a timer, basically the questions are going to take thought and sometimes it's going to take looking some stuff up. And that's going to be easier the better prepared you are and the more your head is wrapped around the material we've been seeing this semester. Obviously, this is a do your own work situation. If you submit answers that clearly aren't your own work, and I'm thinking about ChatGPT here, you don't get those points. So it's one thing to use ChatGPT to help you to tidy up your language a little bit as a spell checker, as a grammar checker. But if I'm seeing ChatGPT's work, ChatGPT gets the points, not the person who cut and paste those answers. I want to see your work. I want to see what you understand. One question was, how many questions are there going to be and what kinds of questions? There are 14 questions total. I guess technically 9 of them are written response. We've got 4 large-ish written response, and some of these will be recycled or adjusted from stuff from the reading assignments, the weekly writing assignments. I don't want recycled answers here, so I point out in the instructions to the test, I want to see your understanding as of right now. You can take your initial submission as a starting point, but I want to see that you've updated. Don't recycle, upcycle. Upcycling's fine, but I want to see where you are right now, not where you were when we asked that question a few weeks ago. 3 of the questions are going to be true/false/explain. So it'll be a question, is this true or false? You say it's false, and you tell me why it's false. If you don't give the explanation, you haven't finished answering the question. There will be a couple extra credit written response questions, and then there will be 5 multiple choice questions. Like I said, this is going to be on a time limit, so it's going to be tight, and I don't expect everyone to get everything. I expect that I will need to curve the exam, so expect it to be tight, right? Expect it to be a tough 2 hours, not as tough as the CFP exam or whatever you guys might be looking for credentials in a few years. But it's going to be something where you're not going to do it perfectly, but there will be a curve. So that doesn't mean you don't get a perfect grade. Some of the different questions have different point values, so be cognizant of that. The multiple choice questions are at the bottom. Those are obviously high rewards, low cost questions. And then the written questions are in descending order up at the top of the exam. So the first question is worth more than the questions below that. So bear that in mind. That's going to affect where you fall on the curve, right? So don't throw away the big questions and spend all your time on the 1-point bonus question. All right, so I think that takes care of our housekeeping. Those are 2 big things: peer evaluations for the final exams. I'm going to be looking over your peer evaluations for the final projects. I'll be looking over those projects over the next week or 2, and then the final exam. So that leaves my questions, or my response to our question this week. What do I think economists should do? And just a fun little fact. So I was reading the essay out of this book from James Buchanan, and I totally forgot. But sure enough, I got a signed copy of this book. 2011, his handwriting was looking like chicken scratch. But I double checked, and it's not just some bookseller. That's signed. I largely agree with what Buchanan has to say. So overall, I take the Feyerabend stance to philosophy of science. I think we want to let 1,000 flowers bloom, try everything, and sort it out after the fact. Pluralism is valuable. We want lots of people trying lots of things. I think one point that I thought was interesting, I think Kang Hai pointed this out in the reading or the discussion, kind of made this point that things like supply and demand are basically still going to be true in 200 years. So there are still going to be, I think, a lot of core things in economics that don't go away, right? Stuff that Adam Smith was talking about 200 years ago that we still believe today, we're still probably going to believe in 200 years. Economics, incredibly powerful tool for understanding, right? But still not great for social engineering. And I think that we're going to trick ourselves into thinking that we're better at it than we are sooner than we should. I think that's kind of largely a history of advance often, is we try stuff out, we make mistakes, and sometimes we make big tragic mistakes. So economics, I think, is going to continue to be a powerful social system. A social science is going to be the queen of the social sciences for a long time to come. But yeah, I think humility is valuable. Also, a fun little thing. Buchanan closes that essay with this discussion of sort of the sociological thing. Whatever I want, there is still the question of what my colleagues do, right? It's not something where one of us gets to decide what economics is going to be. It's a collective decision. Now, how do I think econ will change in the next couple hundred years? I think probably the most important change is going to be disaggregation in macroeconomics. So when Keynes was writing, we didn't have good data, right? You could, if you were in the right place, go to the right office in London and look at a table and get annual data, annual estimates written by hand in some book for some figure, like shipping or whatever, but it's not going to be broken down by minute detail in the way that we can do now. We are well into the point in the history of our economy where we have a ton of data that we could use. A really interesting case of this, the Atlas of Economic Complexity, uses disaggregated data to understand sort of macroeconomic development questions. Atlas.cid.harvard.edu has more stuff on this, but basically they are looking at not just total exports, but exports coded by industry. So you can look at men's shirts, pulling that out of just how much did we sell, right? So when Keynes was writing, it was a question of, okay, we had exports of $5 billion. Now we can say, well, we had $35 million in this, we had $87 million in that, and we can look at currently hundreds of categories, but that's going to get bigger and bigger and bigger as we go forward. One of the issues I have with Keynesian macro is this notion of we just push aggregate demand, but without really thinking about where do we push it. So, and this is kind of really a problem of the textbooks. I think that this is understood in policy circles, and there is going to be a tendency in this direction. So we have a recession and we say, okay, we're going to boost aggregate demand by spending a lot of money in the industry that already has full employment versus in the industry that is seeing the highest rates of unemployment. Right? We can get better at that, and we're going to get even more better at that with time. Geographical refinement and so on. I think, and in line with what a lot of what I'm seeing in your responses, more interdisciplinary work is sort of an obvious thing. And again, sort of related to this disaggregation point, data is going to continue to get easier to collect and to work with. So ubiquitous sensors is a big thing. So in agricultural economics, having GPS data, having moisture data for individual fields, a lot of stuff like that we're going to continue to see. But also it's going to be easier to deal with sort of the vast quantities of data that the internet gives us. The internet gives us a lot of qualitative data, and using things like large language models allows us to automate processing that in a better way than we've had available in the last, say, 10, 15 years. I also think there's going to be a sociological shift. Where the research gets done is going to change, and I think in a lot of ways the last 100 years was kind of an outlier. In the last 100 years, a lot of research was getting done in universities. Before that, sort of pre-Marshall, you had this gentleman scholar thing, right? The man of leisure. And we will continue to have people of leisure. We have more leisure time than we've had at any point in history. And inevitably, some people will just be curious and driven and work to understand something, even if they're not part of a formal educational institution. If they are sharing their data on the internet and engaging with the people in that field, that will count. And I think we'll see more of that in the future. I think also industry. I think we'll probably see more research coming out of industry. We're already seeing a lot of that. Industry has better funding. Industry is able to devote more resources and more time to research. Universities are bogged down with bureaucracy and politics, and the budgets aren't as big as they used to be, and so we're going to see that shift also. But 200 years, that's a long time in the future. That's a long time to make a forecast. And economics, we're not great at that. In any case, this is basically it for the semester. So this is a good point for us to wrap up. Again, I hope that you have gotten a high-level view of the discipline and gotten some understanding for how a discipline develops over time. I really hope you kind of see the applications of these philosophy of science questions we asked way back at the beginning of the semester, which, by the way, good thing to review for the final exam. I hope that you've sort of seen where we came from, see how the limits of what we're dealing with affect what we can do and how that develops, and how this all affects what we can know, how we can be sure that we know it, and all these important questions. So if you have any questions, let me know in the usual places. Otherwise, I look forward to seeing your last little bit of work, and enjoy your summer. Good luck, and I will talk to you in the future.